Hello and welcome to the Nirvana Strength Practitioners Panel Podcast, where we explore the idea of human performance optimization. I'm Ian MacLeod, the co-founder of Nirvana Strength, and on today's episode, we'll be joined by a man with high levels of expertise in lifestyle mentorship. He's the man to help you get your life together. Dai Manuel.
I like that. I'm going to keep that from now on.
Yeah, you get your shit together, yeah. He is the author of Whole Life Fitness Manifesto, How to Spend 30 Minutes a Day for a Healthier Body, Mind, and Spirit. Everybody's got 30 minutes a day. You can make some good improvements to your life. So on today's particular topic is going to be on how to optimize your lifestyle with relationship to goals, life with relation to your relationships, family, friends, whatever might come up today. So anyways, optimization, right? So really quick, Dai, can you just kind of give us a quick breakdown of yourself and who you are, what you do, and I know it could be a whole podcast in itself, but
oh my God,
give us a...
I still get confused when people ask me, what do I do? And I guess it's because I've just had a lot of transitions. I'm 42 years young, and the last 22 years, technically, 22 years of making an income in the fitness and wellness space in that industry. And obviously I've worked in a lot of different capacities, from personal trainer to rock climb belayer to martial arts instructor, and then eventually for 17 years running a fitness retail operation in Canada. So I had a chain of retail stores, sold fitness equipment, both on the B2B side as well as the business to consumer side. Had a lot of fun with that, learned a lot about just running a company, building teams, but also how to really create a lifestyle that's based on living a healthy life. Yeah. That was always the foundation, is health. And now I live in Bali and love it. And
Bali is pretty sweet, man.
I gotta say it's pretty nice.
Hard. Yeah, it's hard not to like Bali.
Yeah, and as you know, now I help facilitate communities and build communities around certain types of events. But I've been very fortunate that I've been able to align with Nirvana Strength.
Yeah,
just
man.
Drop
to have you.
So but during the day, when I'm working with clients, is to help them get really clear on really what is the type of life they want to be living. Not only today, but a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years, 20 years from now. Like, I'm at that point now where I'm 42. Ian, you're a young buck still.
I'm getting up there, man.
Yeah, you're getting up there, but you're not that old. Okay? That extra decade means a lot of changes physically.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when I was in my early 20s and I was working as a personal trainer, I just could not connect with the older guys. I didn't understand. I just thought they were bitching. Like, dude, suck it up, buttercup. And now being in my 40s, I'm like, okay, well, I've got the second half of life ahead of me. I want my second half to be healthier and better than my first half. But that takes effort. It takes clarity, and it takes a plan.
So when, for people that haven't had the chance to speak with a lifestyle coach or speak with trainers, where do you see the initial first step pitfalls at where do people get it wrong from the beginning?
Well, I think it comes down to understanding the difference. You introduced me as a mentor or lifestyle mentorship, and I think about some of the most significant changes I've had in my life. I was morbidly obese as a teenager. We won't go into all that yet, but if it comes up, we'll talk about it.
How big was that? How big were you?
Well, if you're familiar with the body mass index, I was over 40.
Over 40?
Dude, I was a big
And so
kid.
what was your weight? How tall were you?
Well, I wasn't very tall. So now I'm 6'1", but back then I would have been about 9 inches shorter.
Okay.
So this is pre-puberty.
Right.
But I started to kickstart my puberty at the same time I started to lose the weight because I started to become more active and started to eat a bit differently. So it sort of gave me that little bit of a boost that I needed to get testosterone working for me. And
I don't know if I was what. Do you remember how much you weighed?
So at that time, I would have been 5'4" or 5'5", and I probably weighed about 225, 230.
Yeah. That's pounds.
Yeah, pounds.
Okay.
Yeah, not kilos.
Okay.
Oh man, that'd be huge.
Yeah, I definitely. I was a little bit taller. I was at 240 was the biggest I've ever been.
Whoa.
And it's about the same height as I was now, 5.
Okay.
I said a little bit shorter, maybe 5'7".
You were
I'm like
thick.
5'8.5" now, but yeah, I was a big boy. Yeah.
You were
So
playing football though too, right?
yeah, I mean that's the one thing is like always playing sports is always. I mean, I can only imagine what I would have weighed if I hadn't played any sports. I would have been massive.
Oh my god. Yeah.
But yeah, I was always the strongest guy on all the teams that I played on. So it's just. But if you looked at me from the outside, I would look like a big butterball. Like I was just. Yeah.
I know what that's like.
Yeah. So
I guess what it comes down to is this idea of mentorship versus coaching, or understanding the difference between a coach and a mentor. And I find coaches are amazing at helping us develop skills that we need to facilitate changes or ultimately to reach goals, but they're usually shorter term goals. You know, like we're looking at the immediate, and especially coaches at really high levels, they're not looking to completely change like Tiger Swing as an example. I mean, when he went through that transition many years ago, you know, he had a new coach, new swing. That takes a lot. That's a big effort, right? Yeah. But for the most part, high-level coaches, as you know, like I see you coaching people, especially like just to nail that handstand, like you were getting right down to the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
It's like a fraction of a degree change to improve. Most people, when we talk about most, not the elite athletes, not the people that are right into that micro change, but I'm talking about the macro changes. Yeah. I find mentorship works more effectively because there's usually personal experience from the mentor. There's a more of an emotional tie and an empathy.
And I think that's, a great thing with what you do is it's not just about trying to implement like a one-size-fits-all like system.
Correct.
You know, because any trainer can give anybody like a dumb program that's like, all right, you got to eat this much macros and this much calories and you got to train 30 minutes a day or whatever. But there's no like follow-up. There's no actual engagement with the client or the individuals on a very personal level.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, none of us really like to be told what to do. Yet a lot of programs are very dogmatic in how they basically prescribe this is your lifestyle that you should be living to achieve this certain level of health. And there's really no personal connection to that level of health. Is that really what healthy means to me? You know, like Simon Sinek, Anthony Robbins, they always talking about the why, right? Like, why are you connected? Why are you motivated by that? Like, why does it even matter to you? And I think that's a conversation we often skim over without diving into.
It's definitely. I'm sure you have too. I see a big shift in the industry. We find that, very similar to like how. Well, there's a lot of doctors, a lot of people in the pharmaceutical industry that like to push pills. Basically, like to tell people how to deal with like the basic symptoms of why they're feeling bad, or like if a client says that I got a headache, it's like, okay, take this pill, you're not gonna have a headache anymore. But they're still not dealing with like those underlying issues.
Yes.
Yeah, which I think the whole holistic approach is kind of gaining quite big popularity. Do you like using that word, like holistic?
I like holistic, but I also like. I was very fortunate. So 5 years ago, there was an event in Vancouver, where I'm from, called the Superhuman Summit, and it was a TED format. So like TEDx type format, where they had shorter speakers come in that were like biohackers,
not like height
medical
short,
doctors.
but
no,
like,
sorry. They would come in and they would speak on different subjects in breaking technology. But the neat thing was a lot on optimization. But the guy that put it on, they run a medical company, a medical clinic. The son's a functional medicine practitioner. His dad's an MD and a naturopath, so he's done both. And so those two together, along with the son who's a nutritionist and personal trainer, so it's like the father and two sons made up this company. And their approach is so different because they get right down to the nitty-gritty of trying to figure out what is causing the issues that we're seeing show up in these symptoms. And I have an autoimmune disease, and it's chronic. And my hematologist, whenever a hematologist looks at you and says, you're an enigma, that's not a good thing, okay? Like, first of all, what the hell's enigma mean? And it's basically their reason for, I can't quite figure out what's wrong with you, but we know if you lived in a bubble, odds of you getting sick are probably going to be far less. I'm like, I'm not going to live in a bubble. Like, give me a break. Can you do burpees in a bubble? No, you can't. So I had to make some changes, and I aligned with these guys. After DNA testing, hormone profiles, like right down to the nitty gritty, like the full panel of testing. they were able to identify a few key things that my body just was lacking. Or in my case, I couldn't methylate certain vitamins, and that was just creating a cascade of other effects. They didn't cure my autoimmune disease, but now I can manage it based on living a lifestyle a certain way, rather than popping a bunch of pills or taking injections, which is what my hematologists want me to do.
Yeah, it's it's definitely a big industry with even just pure supplements. I know that at the gym and like what we do, and I'm sure yourself as well, it's like with regards to this holistic approach is that we're trying to deal with these problems at the core, the foundation of why you're having these problems. I think
I want to ask you a question. So on supplementation, because that's what it is, right? It's to supplement. Yeah. It's to be an add-on. It's to be really to reinforce the areas that might be considered weak or not optimized. Sure. What's your position on supplements? Like, I'm curious. Like, do you use money supplements?
When I was younger and I did sports, man. I did all the supplements I could even think of, especially like the pre-workouts and stuff. Yeah. But if we actually think about what is the purpose or why do we take particular supplements, we generally try to do it as a quick fix to fill in gaps of where we're lacking in our diet and our nutrition. Right. And it's not that not everybody is going to be so in tune with what they eat that they're going to be like, okay, I need more vitamin C, so I should be eating these foods. I think for the most part, people just generally don't like to think about what they eat. They assume that the fruit that's being served at their supermarket is healthy, not really understanding the idea that there's so much like monocropping, there's so much of the farmlands that are being kind of destroyed, and the vegetables and everything, like even the cows and all the where we get our meat from, like they are not pulling from the best of sources, right? So the soil has basically no nutrients, and like apples today, don't actually look like apples in nature, right? But also two, like they're just lacking in all the nutrients that they once had in the past. And this is just a combination of a lot of things, especially with like all the pesticides and everything that we're putting on our food. But trying to get back to eating as as close to nature as possible. So whether that be like with your meats, as close to focusing on getting your meats from like sustainable farms, focusing on, I think the fruits and vegetables thing is one is quite tough, because you can kind of look at the history of you look like pictures of like what a banana looks like in the store, and then what bananas look like. Dude, it's way different.
Crazy.
It's so different. Yeah. So that's one thing I would encourage people to just even look at photos of like what these fruits and vegetables actually look like in the wild, because there's so much of it that's just been changed through time, where the industry is just basically manufactured these new versions of fruits to make them sweeter, to make them bigger, to make them more appealing. So that's definitely tough part of it.
And you think about nutrition, and I think this is back to your original question. I know we got to get off on these tangents because
there'll be a lot of tangents.
I know, but I guess that part about where most people go awry, and I think the big issue is our understanding of nutrition. Yeah. And what that means. And we sort of, because you and I will use the term diet very differently than media will portray the word diet.
Yeah. And so for one of the discussions that we had we had a discussion on the carnivore diet. Yeah. And the basic idea is going back to ancestral foods that we would eat. And one quote that was brought up real briefly is that we're the only animal on the planet that doesn't actually know what we're supposed to be eating, which from Dominic Rapson, and he's I thought that was just a very interesting quote, because every other animal in the world, they just they eat because it's what nature intended them to eat, and they just eat. But we're still trying to figure it out, even though we're supposed to be so smart, right?
But you know what's so funny about that? Like nutritionary science, like just even the idea that we have vitamins and we have macronutrients, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, like just nutritionary science, it's not very old. And the whole scope of sciences and our understanding, it's really young. And that's why we're learning new things all the time, but there's constantly these studies coming out, and we treat the new study as being dogma, right? Like, this is it. Oh my gosh, with the new breakthrough. Like 1984, Time magazine, they had a cover that vilified eggs. They talked about cholesterol being, tied to heart disease, blood pressure problems, like basically on Time magazine, like eggs are bad for you. Fast forward 30 years, right? In 2014. And there is a cover where they talk about butter is back. Like, it's the cover, but they talk about butter's good for you. Like, it's just, here's a main media publication that we believe that we should be trusting. And they got two very conflicting covers that contradict one another, and yet they're presented as fact, right?
I think, that's kind of a hard part about mass media stuff, is that, it's mass media, by the time stuff gets to the mass media and it's promoted to, the masses, it's already been through so many filters. It's already been kind of watered down, and that's the kind of the idea of like using the body BMI scale, right? Is that it's not intended for like individual people, right? I'm obese. Dude. I'm massively overweight, and it's just it's good that it's changing, right? We got like us working at the grassroots of it, but even the idea of supplements is kind of weird from a logical point of view. It's like, why are we taking supplements? There's obviously something wrong with our food supply.
But here's the best part. I'm gonna buy Wonder Bread. It is like straight up glucose. It's like glycemic index. It's like the equivalent of table sugar, right? We'll buy this, and yet, what's so good about Wonder Bread, besides it tasting like sugar, is the fact that it's enriched with extra vitamins in it. So what do? They strip it of all the nutrients that was ever found in the plant to begin with.
Right.
And then they put stuff back in to say now it's enriched, so it's healthier for you. Like, it's completely fabricated. There's nothing even remotely natural in that stuff. Yet, it's widely accepted as okay. Our school systems use that to feed the kids with. This is crazy.
Well, in the States, they have even... like pizza is considered a fruit because they have because it has tomato sauce.
Yes.
It's like this really weird series. One of my buddies, we did another podcast. Joachim, he's from Belgium, and he showed us who the current the Minister of Health in Belgium is, and she is massively overweight. Massively obese, and it just makes zero sense that you would have someone who clearly cannot actually live by the words or actually perform the actions that she might want people to do. But that's somebody, it's just, you can't really trust somebody like that.
Well, it's hard, right? It's that idea of role modeling, and I think that's really important, which is sort of an extension of mentorship as well. It would be really hard to go to somebody that you're looking to make some lifestyle changes from, and they weren't already living a lifestyle that you want to be living. Do you know what I mean? I think there's that that desire. To be honest, if you couldn't do a handstand, would you be opening this gym? I just think there's a certain level of competency that's required for you to be able to do some of the things that we do, right?
Certain level of competency, and I think to also get away from, it's not that someone can't be overweight and give good nutritional advice, because they can. I think the issue comes with, this is where teaching a system or teaching a pure strict methodology kind of goes array, is that if me as an individual am not at the ultimate place I want to be at with regards to my health, at least I'm working on my way towards that. I'm progressing towards it, and that's what I would focus on teaching as a coach, is that I'm working on making progress, because we're all trying to make progress, instead of saying you have to have a perfect six-pack. Because then you have to be constantly living that six-pack, which is quite hard.
Oh gosh, it's forget it. That's not a life that anybody wants. And again, I think it's good to use that term perfection, right? I much want a life of constant progression than one that's striving for perfection, which I'll never attain. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like the glass is half full or half empty. It's just perspective, but the perspective on the one, it's not very attainable.
Yeah.
because perfection changes. Our ideals of what perfection is changes. It's a moving target, right?
So how's your idea of like what are you aiming towards now? What is your idea of like aiming towards perfection?
Well, I like it's not so much I'm not looking for perfection, but I'm looking for constant measurable improvement. You know, CMI. I remember Anthony Robbins. I think it was like the very first book I read by him like 20 years ago. You know.
You call him Anthony Robbins, not Tony.
Yeah,
Robbins.
sorry. When I read his books, he was called Anthony.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Do you remember any of the old stuff? It was always Anthony Robbins.
No.
Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins now. Okay.
Anyways, I'm totally dating myself here. So I really liked that constant measurable improvement. This idea of just being able to see some measurable changes.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I think data serves a purpose, having data points. But if that's the main focus, like just like you said, 6-pack, and so it's like, well, to have 6-pack, we know usually you have to be in single-digit body fat percentage.
Right.
You know, really for that to just show without the flex,
Right.
got to be single digits. So we understand how these data points relate to either performance or maybe certain body imaging. But if that's the sole focus, it's really hard to sustain that ongoing.
Yeah.
Because there's really no emotional connection. And so I like to lead with sort of the intrinsic motivations versus the extrinsic. And you know, this is getting to more of a when I was in my 20s, even in my early 30s, I was very focused on image. Like,
I think most people are, though. I mean, there's so many studies now where social media, Instagram, all that stuff having such a high negative impact on little young girls. You yourself have
2 teenage daughters,
girls,
man.
yeah. Do you just keep them away from social media? Or?
No, but we have some really very heart-to-heart conversation, you know, around social media and just the portrayal of the images that they're being exposed to. And really, we just want to empower them to be the best versions of themselves. And whatever that might mean to them, we try to help them articulate that in a way that they feel connected to that vision. Because I think that's the piece, right? We can be spoon-fed visions or ideas or dreams, goals, if you will. But if they didn't come from us to begin with, you know, it's just not a strong connection. It's not a strong enough desire. Because if you have to rely solely on willpower to go after that, it's really hard. I mean, willpower, we know, it's a depleting asset. And every day we get a tank and it fills up. Once that tank's empty, you're not too motivated to do too much more, you know? Like,
and I guess this goes back to, I forgot what you were saying. Not just now, but I remember the previous point where you're focused on these intrinsic values.
Yes, yeah. Well, but I guess it depends. Like, you know, here's the big question, right? Like, what's it mean to live a great life? You know, like that's a very subjective question because I'm sure we could ask 20 people and we'd have a different answer from all 20. There might be some similarities, some recurring themes, but everybody's vision or perspective on what that means is different. And I think that's the approach we need to take when we're, you know, not necessarily from a coaching perspective, but from a mentorship perspective, for sure, you know, because it is a very personal conversation. At least I think it should be. If we're talking about life and lifestyle. If we're talking about a specific goal, we got to break that down into smaller goals, chunk it up, and then try to cross off those boxes as we progress, right? And develop the skills needed to continuously progress.
Right. Do a lot of your clients, maybe you start off with figuring out what those smaller goals are in relation to the bigger goals, but do you find through the process that as they complete these smaller goals that sometimes their bigger goals change?
Absolutely. Oh, bang on. Yeah, totally spot on with that, Ian. Like that's, almost 100% of the time.
What are some examples of like how do they change?
Well, I've seen it in some cases where, most recently I launched a program for dads specifically. So I wanted dads that were over 40. Yeah. I customized that because, again, that's me. So I'm like, I want to work with guys like me. I know some of the struggles they're dealing with. And I like to think I've figured out a process that can be implemented and get results. And so I'm working with these guys. And some of them came in and they're just like, I want to be fit. And I'm like, well, why do you want to be fit? Well, to be honest, I want to take my shirt off at the beach. You know, that is literally is the thing. They want it, what they're really saying is they just don't feel confident in themselves.
Right.
They're embarrassed to take their shirt off. Like they don't feel like they used to.
They do know that the whole dad bod thing is kind of the trend, yeah?
Yeah. I've got some articles on my blog if you want to read about that. And I don't agree with that, but it's definitely, the cliche is there, and it is strong. But where I was going with that is, as soon as they start to feel better, you know, their brain couldn't even fathom anything beyond just taking their shirt off and feeling confident. And that's a good vision, a good goal to shoot for. I want you to have that feeling. I want you to be confident. You should feel confident that you can take your shirt off and not be embarrassed, not be so judgmental of yourself. But it has to go beyond that, you know, because our bodies change, man. It's always changing. I think there's one given in life. You know, well, they'd say there's two, right? Death and taxes. But I mean, really what it comes down to is we all are born and we all going to die. And our bodies are going to change. You know, Buddha talked about it 2,500 years ago.
Right.
What do you call it? Nietzsche, I think it's something like that. Anyways, it's basically everything changes. It's always changing. It's energy, right? So let's just try to slow that down as best we can by making some healthier decisions and choices. And sorry, to answer your question, the goals, they start getting incremental improvements. For me, like I get people doing a detox that's 10 days long. The sole purpose of that, like no working out except for walking 10,000 steps a day.
Right. Is that mostly just fasting, or?
It's intermittent fasting along with just foods, whole foods, like no supplements or anything like that, but whole foods that encourage. Well, I guess the kidneys and the liver's working a little bit better. But also they're drinking 3 liters of water a day minimally. On top of that, and so we flush a lot of inflammation. Most guys lose anywhere from about 8 to 12 pounds in that 10 days, and it's mostly just inflammation. It's just they're retaining so much water, right? As soon as that happens, you know what happens? Like the joints start to feel better. They're less achy. All of a sudden, you think a little bit clearer. Their mindset starts to shift because all of a sudden now it's like, whoa, I feel better, you know, and that all of a sudden shifts their vision. So what they were thinking about before, about just feeling confident with their shirt off, it's not just that anymore. It's like, I can see how this can benefit me for the next 30 years.
Yeah, it's quite nice and interesting to see how people's perception of what is possible changes so much.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it changes so much, you know, even we're so influenced by our environment, our surroundings, and if you're like, let's say from Dallas, Texas, where it's like one of the fattest countries in America, and America being one of the fattest countries in the world, like if being normal in that scenario is to be like 50 pounds overweight, or you might actually be on the lean side of being 50 pounds overweight, you know, people's perception of what is healthy or what is fit is going to be completely different than other areas as well. So I think, changing changing the idea of like, what does it mean to be normal? You know, like if everybody in your family is popping, you know, 10 pills a day, and if you're a little kid growing up in that, you're going to think, oh, wow, it's normal to be popping pills. I think, getting people in the right mindset, changing their expectations. Can be a very difficult process, but I think, you know, you're focused on the smallest of components, right? Changing little things that lead to big changes, which inherently in themselves will lead to a complete mind change.
Yes. Oh, I love that you brought up the mind change thing, because if we look at neurosciences, and especially the concept of neuroplasticity, which they've proven, we can rewire the brain. Like, if there's certain habits and behaviors we don't like, and they're causing us a lot of pain and discomfort, and ultimately some of the conditions that we might be dealing with, we can change that at any time. Like, it's just a choice, but then you have to do that other thing, usually the opposite of what you're doing. So maybe it's drinking a 6-pack of beer a day, right? Well, let's replace that with 6-pack of water. Do that long enough, that becomes the new behavior, the dominant behavior, the dominant thought process, action, right? With the reaction. And it's really cool. Like I just love that idea that science is coming out with all this great proof that shows that we aren't stuck. We're not ever really stuck, because I think some people just give up, right? Like, there's a question I often ask clients, and you know, I do these discovery or transformation calls where it's just, you know, a complimentary call just to talk and see if we're compatible to work with each other. And I often ask, when was the last time you felt good? Like, people aren't used to being like, what do you mean? Felt good? Like, just woken up and just
no pain.
Was excited.
Right.
Like, didn't feel any discomfort, felt like you had regular energy, felt like you had a good night's sleep. Like, when was the last time? And they're like, I don't know. Because, you talking about earlier that normal, like that's their normal, is feeling the way they're feeling now.
Was it, I think maybe you were talking about you remember the dog story?
Yeah.
Do you want to
Sure.
say what it is?
Oh, okay. Well,
I think this dog story is a good idea of like, people understanding like sometimes small pains eventually become normal, and then we just accept them in our lives. But anyways,
so
it's a
true.
good story.
Well, thanks, Ian. I like story time. Story time.
People relate to stories.
They do, And when I first heard this story, it was a man by the name of Les Brown shared it.
Okay.
And he's a very accomplished speaker, also a great author. He's got a lot of motivational books. But he shares this story of this young man that moves to a neighborhood. And in this new neighborhood, he walks by a house on his way to work every day. It's one of his neighbors 2 doors down. So he's walking by this house every day, and there's an older man, probably in his 80s or 90s, sitting on this porch in a rocking chair, rocking away. Now, beside this old man is an equally old dog. Right? Dog ears, at least 80, 90, maybe 3 digits. It's an old dog. And what really stands out to this young man every time he walks by is all he can hear is that chair rocking and the dog moaning, groaning, whimpering, like just nonstop whimpering, right? It's like it's never quiet.
Right.
And so he walks to work, he walks back, and on his way back, well, look, the old man's out there rocking in his chair, and the dog's still whimpering. Yeah. Now this goes on for a matter of days. Eventually, this young guy decides that I got to do something. I got to go find out what the hell's going on here. So he walks up to the old man and he's like, "Hey, old man." I'm sure he was a little bit more polite than that. But he's like, "Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
How you doing? I just moved to the neighborhood." "Oh, hello, Sonny. How you doing?" "Oh, pretty good. I got to ask you something. Your dog, he's crying all the time. Is your dog okay?" "Oh. Well, yeah, he's okay." Well, why does he keep crying? Yeah. He's whimpering all the time. Like, obviously he's not okay. "Well, no, he's laying on a nail." What? The young guy's like just flabbergasted. He's like, "Well, he's sitting on a nail?" "Yeah, he's just sitting on a nail." "Well, why? Why doesn't he just get up?"
Yeah.
And the old man looks at him and he goes, "Well, Sonny, it just doesn't hurt bad enough. It just doesn't hurt bad enough." Like, you think about it. Like, in our lives, do we have nails that we're tolerating, that are sitting in us, aggravating us, creating so much discomfort, but we learn to just live with it. We accept it as being okay. And I always pose this question to people when I tell them this story. It's like, what is that nail for you right now? What is that one thing you really dislike it about yourself? Yeah. It could be just a trait. It could be a physical thing, like maybe something to do with your health and your well-being, or maybe you smoke, maybe you drink too much. Like, there's these things that we judge ourselves for all the time. But some of them come down to just physical pain, discomfort, and we accept it, and we just live with this nail,
I feel like there's got to be a slightly additional part to the nail somehow, in that there's so many people dealing with like these small nagging problems in their lives, whether it be like an actual physical pain or stress, or they're taking pills to cover symptoms, but the nail, that problem over time magnifies. Yes. And then eventually that nail goes from like barely pricking his skin to being like jammed all the way up his behind.
That's right.
So there's so many, we experience a lot of people with like have small nagging problems that if not taken care of will eventually accumulate, will get worse, and then eventually lead to like a herniated disc, or get some major injury that forces them to actually deal with the problem.
By that time, it's going to take a lot more work.
Yeah, way more work, for sure. I mean, because the last thing people want is to have to go through surgery, get cut open. I mean, that's one thing that's just not recommended at any point. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of... Yeah, it's funny if you go to a doctor and the first thing they recommend is just start cutting you open.
Yeah.
You probably should get a second and third, maybe fourth opinion on that kind of stuff.
Dude, like really, I mean, when you were saying that, I just kept thinking about the frog thing. The thing with frogs, right? You put them in a boiling pot, they want to jump out right away.
Right.
But you put them in a pot, you start to heat it up, you can bring it to boiling, that frog doesn't move.
Mm-hmm.
It sits in there and it will die. It will
Yeah.
burn to death, like boil to death. Insides will just fry. But it's because, it may be uncomfortable, but they just adapt, right? And I think a lot of us adapt to our illnesses thinking that, well, this is just the new truth for me.
Yeah.
But I find for most, like I have a chronic autoimmune disease. It's for most people, I've been on forums out there trying to connect with people with the same condition.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I can't be a part of it because the amount of stories that people have talking about how their life has been completely messed up.
Yeah.
And they use this condition as a scapegoat to say, well, I can't exercise. I mean, just the list of symptoms I could give you would sometimes show up for me.
Right.
And most people would probably be very discouraged. But you know what? I'm not going to let it ruin my life.
Yeah.
I deal with it.
So going back to the dog, right? I think for a lot of people, it's just it ends up being a timing issue, right? Like the nail just doesn't hurt enough for them to actually want to deal with the problem.
Right. Until you get tetanus.
Until you get tetanus, or you need to get your leg chopped off.
Dude. Oh my God, yeah. Gangrene for sure.
Yeah.
But it's interesting if you start to look at your life from that perspective. It's like, well, do I have any nails in my life? Is there any of those things that I'd really like to change? Well, just focus on one. Like if you just focused on one, I often find they're often connected. Like there's a bigger issue at hand, but sometimes you pick off the little ones first. Sort of like what you were talking about goals earlier. You start to see some constant measurable improvement where you're seeing these little victories. It makes you feel good. You get this little dopamine hit, right? Like, that's the neat thing about questions, right? When you ask people questions, there's a little bit of serotonin that's released. This now, basically, it creates this environment for your brain to start seeking out answers because it actually relaxes the brain. It calms the brain so it can start to focus, start to think about what that answer to that question that's been asked. And what happens is as the brain starts to do that, it starts to come towards a conclusion or connecting the dots, as they say, that's when dopamine is released. We love dopamine. I mean, dopamine and adrenaline are like the drugs of choice,
Yeah, I think, the hormonal release that we experience through like a lot of what the training style is nowadays with the fast workouts and right. And I do find, let's say in the fitness industry, where people they work out to get that feeling, and they're like, oh, I love the feeling when I'm like crushed after my training program, and then but they're not actually knowing why they're training. They train to get that feeling. And when you actually listen to what they're talking about, it really sounds like they're just like drug addicts. Like they're just doing something so they can get their fix. Yeah.
You're familiar with heart rate variability?
Yeah.
It is, if there's one thing people take away from this podcast, this episode, I want to empower them to do one thing. One thing. There's a free app called Elite HRV. It's a free app. You will need a telemetry strap. This is a chest strap. I'm going to drop a brand name here. Polar. I'm not affiliated.
Okay.
But Polar makes the new version of their Bluetooth straps called the Polar H10.
Okay. What's
really cool is if you go to any sort of fitness center or global center that has cardio pieces, this chest strap will also be compatible.
Yeah.
It syncs up with your phone, and you do this HRV test, heart rate variability test, every morning. You will establish a baseline, and this is the little variation in your heart rate that tells us if you're in a state of heightened stress, and it all ties into your nervous system, central nervous system. And if you're in a heightened state of stress, these are the days where you should be doing more of an active recovery type day.
Right.
This is not the day you go and you try to PR snatch, and so you start to establish this baseline, but all of a sudden there gets a point, like after my clients have been doing that for 2 weeks consistently, I then ask them to write down the number they think their score will be before they take their test. And what's is amazing, they get within 2 or 3 basis points of accuracy. They can start to just know by when they wake up, okay, I can tell today's not going to be a good day to push myself at the gym. Because you start to learn how to read your level of stress. And I think that's where you were going with that is, they might be addicted to that feeling, but the problem is their body, That's their mind saying, I need more of that.
Yeah.
But their body might be saying the opposite. Yet they fight through it because they want the fix.
Yeah.
And this is the worst thing you can do. And that's where you're in this heightened state of you push yourself into adrenal fatigue for one, and then you also are going to completely tax the system.
Yeah.
You're going to get hurt because your nervous system's not working. It's like crazy. Right?
I mean, I definitely do think like it's okay to do it if it has a very specific purpose. We talk about this when we're teaching like our classes, is that if you're doing what you're actually intending to and you're wanting to do, like if you're training in that manner where you're just trying to kill yourself, if you're doing it for a specific reason, beyond the actual feeling of getting the hormonal release, it does serve a purpose. If you're preparing for competition, like there are times where you need to go and push yourself to the complete max. But even high-level athletes, Olympic weightlifting athletes that compete, they are not doing like 90, 100% that often. They're a lot of their training is 70, 80%, maybe tops. And the big thing with like most Olympic athletes, particularly from like China, they all have a very good foundation in calisthenics and gymnastic strength training, where they're working on the joints, the ligaments, the tendons.
So smart.
And we're thinking about the longevity of the body, again, avoiding injury, preventing issues with like chronic inflammation. But yeah, it all fits in. Yeah.
I have to, I'm going to admit some of my own fault here, and I've been so good at coming to Nirvana and training for about 6 weeks. I was on a tear, and just things were rocking and rolling. Then I had a 2-week break, and I wasn't doing some of the mobility stuff that I know I ought to be doing, because I know how it makes me feel. And an old injury creeped in again. Yeah. And it's funny, but I've been back now for a weekend. Yeah. It's already subsiding. Like your body knows what it wants, but it's proof that the training style that you guys do, other than us becoming affiliated based on some of these community initiatives, I'm not an owner in your company by any means, and I'm not a gymnastics expert, or a calisthenics expert. However, I can speak from personal experience as a guy that's 42 years old. Holy shit, I wish I discovered this 10 years ago. Yeah. I just think if I had implemented this kind of a training regimen on top of some of the other stuff that I do, oh man, it's such a different place.
Yeah, it's tough with regards to fitness industry, because it's like, okay, you have like all your friends doing like super fast, super fun stuff, and then I'm asking you to sit in the corner and do like an ankle mobility exercise, and it's just, mentally it's just so difficult to wrap your hand around. And this is with like healthy people, right? Like someone who has their health, take their health for granted always, right? And then as soon as they get sick, they're like, oh man, I should have done all this stuff. And it's the funny thing about prehabilitation or preventative measures that you take, not just in your physical being, but we do it with nutrition, right? Like we eat a certain way to help preemptively deal with, I don't know, maybe you have a family history of I don't know, cancer or whatever. Like you're going to take preemptive measures to kind of limit your risk of getting those diseases. But we tend not to do the same with like physical training.
Think about it.
It's tough. It's definitely tough. Yeah.
On the nutrition side too, like if you could look somebody in the eye and say, listen, you can go eat that Big Mac, but you're going to die 10 minutes after you eat it. I don't think they'd be selling billions of burgers, billions of people served. The problem is it's such a gradual decline. And it's compounding over a drastic period of time.
It's like the frog thing, right?
Yeah.
It's a gradual increase in temperature, but for all of us, it's a gradual decline in health. And that's why like doing the before and after picture is so hits people really hard, because they see the massive change. But if you're looking at yourself every day, you can see it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's why it's always nice to get around people that know you, right?
Yeah.
You see that change. Yeah.
For that change part though, like how do you measure that change with your members and your clients? Like how do you show them that they're actually making improvements?
So I like basic, I call it just baseline testing. And I do mainly body weight movements, but just I don't ask them to do handstands or anything. I don't even ask them to do handstand holds. For a lot of my clients, that's just not in their repertoire right now where they're at.
Right,
you know?
right.
But I meet them where they're at. So they might be like even doing a freestanding squat, right?
Okay.
But they may not have the proper mobility, so it's limited range. They might be hitting a chair, just up and down off of a chair, like a box squat, but it's elevated. I work within the range of motion, but we'll do some basic testing. It takes about 10 minutes to do these movements. It at least establishes a you are here. Like it's like the store directory in the mall, right? There's a big red circle that says you are here. And then from that, we can plot our course.
Yeah.
We need data points. That's how GPSs work, right? We need a starting point, and then we need an end point, and it does the rest. Well, when people come to us as their coaches or their mentors, they're entrusting in us the ability to serve and help them.
Right.
Connect the dots, right?
That's a big one for sure.
But you have to be willing to submit to that process. And there's a lot of trust involved. I don't take that for granted for a second.
Yeah.
And I believe there's a lot. I'm a results-based guy. And I get very emotionally attached to helping people because I want the result for them is, in some cases, more than they want it themselves.
But I think that's that makes you a good coach, I think there's so many, and this is not just on the client side of wanting like fast results and setting maybe unrealistic expectations, but these people who call themselves coaches or call themselves trainers, and they just spend all their time just basically just dealing with the symptoms, right? They train somebody for 12 weeks, help them get a six-pack, and then just send them on their way. But that same client has to come back after 3 months because they've gained all or more of their weight back.
So true.
And there doesn't seem, and even in some arenas, like let's say even CrossFit or yoga or whatever, like the trainer doesn't take any responsibility if their client gets hurt performing exercises that they prescribed.
Right.
So this would be like if a doctor like prescribed you some pill, and then you end up getting like diabetes because you took this pill. Or I don't know, maybe whatever it might be, but it's the doctor's fault, right? And they need to take responsibility for that. So there's some ethical, moral values that are kind of just being brushed off to the side that I think is a big problem among coaches.
I agree with you, and I think that's also because money does come into play, and when there's money involved, there's it starts with a letter M, just like morality, and unfortunately the two don't equate the same. But it's back to your question about change, which sort of ties into this idea of just coaching and mentorship, because they are two very different things, but I think it's more powerful to have both in one. If you can have a coach, this can also be a mentor, and I believe that you can have mentors that can be great coaches. It's harder to find great coaches that are also great mentors, because I just find it's usually one translates into the other one better than the other way. Where I'm going with this, though, baseline fitness testing, something that's very simple, but something that can be retested again simply. And I always program in that it's redone every 6 weeks, this baseline foundational test. That is more on the performance and the sensation of feeling the improvements. Because when you look at the scores from their initial first testing, and then you retest 6 weeks later, as long as they've been adhering to a certain lifestyle and just doing certain things to make themselves feel better, they're going to see a performance improvement. They'll feel that difference. But the big metric, and the ones that aren't so tangible, is when you wake up in the morning, do you feel like you got energy? Mid-afternoon, when you used to want to go for that sugary treat or a big double coffee, do you feel like you need that? How are your sugar cravings? What about your quality of sleep now? And I get right down to the relationships they're having. Like, how have the conversations been with your family? I have this thing where I'm like, get off devices. An hour before bed, no screen time. Shut her down, Create rituals around the life that you want to be living. But make it a ritual. So it's something that you don't skip out on, right? Like, you don't. Like, man, living in Bali is inspiring. Seeing all these Balinese, they are the rituals that they have, and they don't miss them ever. Like, the offerings every day, a few times a day. Like, they don't miss it. Well, what's the non-negotiable in your life that you can treat with the same amount of respect?
How do you, so it's not, I mean, being in Canggu and like where we're at, it's very health and fitness conscious, and the environment here is so amazing because there's just so many like-minded people, but not everybody's going to be able to just like leave their life and just come out to Bali and live, right? So, I mean, if you're in an environment where everybody around you is like, you know, living a certain way, how do you, from, you know, that environment, social aspect, community aspect, how do you deal with, because I can see like scenarios where people try to get healthy, and by doing it, they almost become, they get ostracized from their community for wanting to be different, right? Yeah. But
and it's usually the other people that are judging them because now they think, what, we're not good enough? We want to change how we are? You just want, because a lot of the times we just reflect back, right? Like, I mean, we see in others the things that often we don't want to see in ourselves, or we do see in ourselves. You know, it's sort of that idea the other person's a mirror of yourself. And I find in those situations, I see it more often with family. Like, it's like even when I'm talking to one spouse and you know, someone said, you know, I really want to work with you, but I'm going to have to talk to my wife, or I'm going to have to talk to my husband. You know, it's like, even just our mindset around going to a spouse, it's often from a place of wanting to gain their permission to do something that's different than they've been doing. You know, to contract a coach, to join a new gym. And I always try to ask them to sort of shift their perspective on that conversation, because when you're going to them, really you want to go to them for support, not for permission. You know, this is a change I want to make for me. You know, I need your support to do this. And if we don't have that, you got to seek it somewhere else. But you have to be 100% accountable to yourself first and foremost. And I think that's actually prefaces everything. You know, when you accept 100% responsibility for your current state of being, your current mindset, like, just own it.
I think it's quite, it's quite interesting. Like, if you were to tell your spouse or tell your best friends, like, man, I really don't feel good, I don't feel healthy, I need to do some things to help make me feel better. I mean, in that scenario, if your friends are kind of just like, oh, why do you want to do it? I mean, just the idea, like, you want to be better, you want to feel better, you want to feel healthier, and if someone is actually wanting to question your motives as to why you want to feel better, it seems...
I know you're familiar with Jim Rohn.
So
he's got a quote, you know, we are the net sum of the 5 closest relationships, or usually the 5 people we have the closest relationships with. So those 5 people that we spend the most time around, that we typically are very close to them. You know, and it's this power of association. And I'm in my 10th year of no drinking. You know,
that's awesome, man.
Thank you.
I mean, I still like a drink myself.
It was a choice, but it was because I was abusing alcohol. I had a really bad relationship with it. It also led to narcotic use. It also led to promiscuity. Let me not being the type of man that I wanted to be. And when I looked at my association, and then I made the change, my wife asked me one day, you know, and it was either she was going to leave me and take the kids and we were over, but instead she was like, I'm going to give you one more chance. But this is the question that she asked me before she gave me a chance, because I needed to really think on this question. And her one question she asked me after a night of partying, I was like hungover off my tree. She sat me down at the table. The kids are watching Dora the Explorer on the couch, and I'm sitting there, eyes bloodshot, you know, just feeling like crap. And she looks at me and she goes, "Are you being the type of man that you would want to marry your daughters?"
That's a tough one, man.
Dude, like, it's like instant. I'm like, what am I going to say to that? I couldn't honestly tell her I was. I couldn't honestly say I would be very grateful to see my daughters marry somebody like me. I couldn't. I couldn't, like, it was a moment where it was very clear, okay, I got to make some changes now. You know, you talked about the nail, right? Like, I had a 9-inch nail through one temple and the other temple, and it was like, this has got to be dealt with now. And that's when I made a choice. But I had to look at my association. Because my current group of friends, they were no longer my friends.
I think, definitely. I mean, like, something like that, I mean, it really opens, I mean, for you, it was a big changer.
I wouldn't be here today if my wife didn't ask me that question. I can tell you that straight up, man.
I think, like, so for, like, at one point did you ever do a bodybuilding competition?
At one point I started training. I ended up doing Body for Life a lot. I did that in the before and after photos, but I got more into Taekwondo and kickboxing, so I started competing in that. So it took me away from bodybuilding because I got into that performance of fighting, but no, I haven't.
So I did one, like I went from 110 kilos to 95 kilos quite fast, like once I finished playing the sports. And I was just stuck at 95 kilos for about 3-4 years until one of my friends suggested that we do a bodybuilding competition together. So it was not really my thing, but he's a really good friend, so I wanted to do it with him and support him. But through this process, I come to kind of figure out, who are actually like my real friends and who were my drinking friends. Because once we got to the point where we really needed to cut weight, unfortunately, about 3 months into the process, he got a herniated disc, so he was just done with the process, but I just kept going. And so I had a 3-4 month period where I knew that if I went to a social arena where drinks were involved, that I would drink. So I just basically removed myself from them. And so during this 3-4 month period, I would invite friends to meet me for coffee, to meet me for lunch as opposed to dinner. And it's amazing how like so many people that you would think are really good friends, but they would only meet you if like alcohol was involved, or they would only meet you if there was you're going out to a club or like very specific situations. And it kind of sucked initially because you kind of start losing what you think are really good friends. But I think looking back, it was a really good transformative time because it just helped you realize that sometimes like people that are in your life are not really there to support you. They're kind of there just to support themselves in what they want to do and what their habits are.
Codependency.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. And if you're not familiar with the term codependency, it's this, you see relationships where one spouse or friend will enable the other one to continue doing the things that they usually want to change, or they recognize are self-destructive. Because now you're both dependent. One's dependent on being sort of the martyr.
Yeah.
So they want to be in that power position to have something to hold against that person in some cases, feel like they've got that authority over them.
Yeah.
So they allow them to continue to do the bad habit.
Right.
Like they're both equally dealing with problems, but there's a whole codependency. There's a great book called Conscious Loving, and it's by the same guy that wrote The Big Leap, Gay Hendricks, and his wife helped co-write it. And it's just amazing. It opens your eyes because when you start looking at certain patterns in your life, it's like, whoa. Why do I actually have this pattern? You start to look back in your past, where it came from. Where did you develop that habit? And that's why I really feel for people. Like making changes, it's not easy. Like it takes quite a bit to change a behavior, like to really hardwire in a new one. And we have to look at where's the roots. Where's that planted? What was it that we created that from?
So in all the clients and everybody that you're dealt with. What would you say are like some of the more like kind of common issues that people are dealing with?
With respects to
things want to change in their life. Like, are there any commonalities between clients?
Well, I think it's
kind of pop up the most often.
Well, I think it's partially due to the fact that most of my clients are online, so they've seen me speak. Usually somewhere, and then we work together online.
Okay.
And so based on the places that I'm speaking, there's a common interest. So if I'm at a conference or doing a keynote, I share some stories, often some personal stories of where I've made some changes.
Right.
And people resonate to the changes that I've made because they see some of the similar challenges. So one of mine was dealing with weight and losing a lot of body fat because I was quite unhealthy. I had other health complications due to that. Overcoming alcohol abuse and narcotic abuse, as well as just not being the best version of me and knowing it, and then my autoimmune disease. So I have clients that actually are dealing with very similar struggles.
Right.
And that's the long and short of it. But the one thing that's in common, and it's ubiquitous across the board, like it is the same for every single one, is they've gotten to a point where the pain of not changing hurts more than the pain of changing.
Yeah.
Like that's bottom line. It's gotten to that point where they're like, oh shit, I need to do something about this.
Have you read the book, The Tipping Point?
Oh, God, Malcolm Gladwell. Amazing book, man.
Yeah, I think, it happens, let's say like going to like physical problems that people might have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think for almost everybody that comes to our gym, it's just it's never really like one traumatic experience that like they didn't like just fall off a building and they broke their arm or something like that. Like you know, if they're dealing with like tendonitis issues in the elbow or just joint problems, right? These are things they've accumulated like over time, 20, 30 years of bad posture, bad habits, whatever it might be. And then eventually the body no longer can adapt. And then they, you know, they hit that tipping point and their body just breaks down.
That's right.
But I think that, that's a really great book, and it's something that can be applied to a lot of people's lives, and trying to identify like what are these smaller issues or the relationships that we have in our lives that end up over time just completely destroying us.
I like that you brought up tipping point. It's like so true, right? It comes that point. Yeah, there's literally that point where it's like, oh shit, you know, and it's unfortunate we have to get to that oh shit moment at times to make the change. It's because you were talking about the preventative aspect and being just proactive, realizing that, hey, I am getting older. My body is, if I don't use it, I will lose certain aspects of it.
Right.
So because we know this to be a truth, why don't I do something about it? And a lot of people, like, we know. Like, I don't think we're going to argue that smoking doesn't cause cancer. I've never been in a debate with somebody where they're like, no, it doesn't. Like, I think people widely accept that, yet they do it anyways. And I forget the term. There's an actual psychological term that they've given this sort of idea of ignoring the negative side effects, right?
Yeah.
And we basically just learn to be ignorant by choice, which is kind of weird when you think about ignorance, but it's just a choice.
And I think some of that does just go back to even going back to the frog thing, where the situation in our life, you know, maybe the initial, like seeing an initial negative reaction that our body has to food, or seeing something that how our body changes from like being overly stressed, and we take these kind of small signals from our body as just something that you're just going to work through, right? Like you just kind of don't actually take in these notices that your body is giving you to, you know, and using them as signals to make some kind of change. And we don't listen to our body, right? That's kind of the big part of it. And that's tough with regards to like when people are making choices about their nutrition. There are a lot of people building a belief system around it. A lot of people are choosing a specific diet based off of some weird subjective data. And it's, you know, definitely hard to continue this like exploratory process of figuring out what is good for you. But I think having coaches like yourself, you know, guiding people through this process and actually helping them understand that, asking the right kind of questions to allow them the opportunity to give answers that help them actually realize what's going on. So
true.
Yeah. I mean, big thanks to, you know, to you, man. Like, I mean, there's, you know, coaches like yourself who actually help push this, you know, holistic approach, or actually provide real change in people's lives that has I think has a much bigger ripple effect. You know, it helps people change their friends, their family, and more so than just getting like the six pack. Or I mean, of course, we would all love a six pack, but
you know, the funny thing is there's nothing wrong with that as a goal. Like, you know, I don't like to label goals as good or bad, because I don't really feel like, I mean, obviously there can be some moral debate if it's things that cause harm.
Sure.
You know, like we can start talking morality of that. But in general terms, like even food, like I don't really label food as good or bad, because it's not inherently evil. It's not like, you know, that burger's got a gun to my head. It's not like it's a bad, evil being that's wanting to cause harm to me. It's if you look at it from the science of nutrition, it's made of fats, it's made of proteins, it's made of carbohydrates.
Right.
You know, like, but eating one meal versus another one, maybe having a big salad with some salmon on it versus this sugary, manufactured, highly processed, whatever it is,
Right.
you know, they're both going to give me energy. It's just one's going to be more in alignment with the lifestyle that I've said I want to attain. One's taking me away.
Yeah.
And if you start looking at your choices and just ask yourself that question before you make that decision to do a certain action, it's like, is this in alignment with what I want and how I want to be feeling? Or is this one better in alignment? And you got to be honest with yourself. Well, no, this isn't. And if you decide to do it anyways, do that thing. Maybe have a half sack of beer and have the pizza and go for dessert. Like, that's not bad. Don't beat yourself up over it.
Yeah.
Don't do it every day. But at least in that moment, appreciate it for what it is. If you're around with friends and family, you're having a great time, there's going to be birthday cake, there's going to be pizza, well, it's fine. Like, I think we have this sort of black and white approach, especially when it comes to nutrition.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's so simple, because there are going to be situations. I go to my kids' birthday parties, you know, and there's cake.
Yeah.
I'm going to eat the cake, man. I'm going to eat it. But I don't beat myself up about it, because if we label it as evil or as bad, that's where guilt can come in, right? Oh my gosh, I shouldn't have eat that cake. I feel awful. Oh my gosh, like, I'm fat. Like, just, it's so gnarly. Just own it and be okay with it. And just realize, I'm eating this cake. I'm going to enjoy it. I love the moment. This is a memory that goes down in history, or at least on Instagram. And, you know, I'm okay with it, because this isn't my everyday life.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
for sure. I mean, definitely really fully taking in, like, the pleasures in life and the special moments in life. It's important. And, but defining yourself by any particular moment is probably not the right path to go.
It makes things really hard to, you know, like, guilt is just a negative. Like, it's a negative emotion, but I mean, it's a very limiting emotion. You know, like, it
can be consuming too.
Yeah, really, it
very
does.
consuming.
But, you know, to just end on a positive,
just eat the cheesecake.
Well, eat the cheesecake, but love it for what it is in the moment. But also realize you are fully empowered to make a change at any given time in your life. You are not peg-holed in to an endless reality that can't change. Like, it's the one thing that we can all agree to. Tomorrow's going to be different than today. You know, and some of the decisions I make today and the actions I take can influence tomorrow potentially. It doesn't guarantee that there'll be a certain outcome tomorrow, but it does definitely influence what could potentially happen.
Right.
You know, the waves originate from somewhere.
Yeah.
They all end up on the beach at some point. You know, but it doesn't mean that we can't appreciate it for what it is, and the path that it's taken to get to that moment. But now that that moment's done, you choose how to make the next one. You know, like, it's just
it's never ending, which is kind of sucks too. I mean, like, it's just never. I mean, you just always have to be. I mean, sure, you're gonna have these pleasurable points and points you celebrate in life, but health doesn't end. I mean, unless you want to end.
Yes.
Yeah.
And really, happiness, right? Like, are you happy? Do you have significant relationships that you're very happy to have and proud to have, and just thrive with those relationships? You know, those communities.
I like that word, thrive.
Yeah.
Thriving is good. We don't want to just survive life, right? We want to.
Dan Buttner. The Blue Zones. You've heard of the Blue Zones.
Of course.
Yeah. It's if you're listening to this and you haven't heard the Blue Zones, just go watch his TED Talk. Or there's a National Geographic video on their website that talks about the Blue Zones. But there's these people that are living to be 100 years and older, the highest population density in these 5 cities around the world. And listen, there's some pretty obvious reasons why these communities are living that long. But they're thriving, like 105 years old, independent, living on their own, gardening every day.
Still moving every day.
Dude, it's like they're living a good life. I'd go as far to say a great life. At 100 years old, if I can be like, that's a great life. And but you look at it, there's a lot of commonalities. We can learn from that. Like, we can learn. Like, there's proof that living a lifestyle a certain way, there's longevity there. But not only longevity, it's not just like you're living long and living in an old home and taking a lot of pills in order to stay alive.
Right.
You are
very
thriving,
active,
you know, and I always get optimistic because of that. You know, like, I always feel optimistic. I always feel like, okay, I want to be that guy, you know? So what are my daily choices? Are they in alignment, doing what they were doing?
Right.
You know? Oh, okay, it is. And we won't go in. That's a whole nother podcast.
It goes deep, man. So for those living,
Yeah.
don't just survive life. Yeah, thrive. Yeah, that's
Thrive,
the key take point. Yeah,
for sure.
cool. So, Dai, thank you again for coming on to the
Thanks, Ian.
Practitioners Panel podcast. If you want to check out Dai's book, Whole Life Fitness Manifesto, you can find it on
Pretty much Amazon, most bookstores.
Amazon, most bookstores everywhere.
Yeah, pretty much everywhere.
Ebook too, yeah.
Yeah, if you want the ebook, just go to my website, DaiManuel.com, and you can find all my contacts and reach out to me on Instagram. I'm very active on that
Instagram
platform.
handle?
Dai Manuel. The fortunate thing of having a unique name, I've got my name on all the social platforms. So you just type in my name, you'll find me. Don't worry.
How do you spell your last name?
Manuel.
Okay, and we'll also put it into the podcast notes.
Cool.
Thank you for listening. Thank you again for sharing all your knowledge, man. It's I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that will find it beneficial.
Thank you.
And if you want to see Dai in person, come out to Bali.
Strength,
come out to Nirvana Strength.
Oh yeah, Mentorship Monday.
Mentorship Mondays.
Hell yeah. And I just wanted to quickly say thank you, Ian, for just creating the space for these communities to thrive in. You know, it takes a lot of energy, a lot of resources, a lot of patience to build what you're building. And it's remarkable to see how everybody's coming together with this common vision that you and Johnson have painted. And so it's pretty freaking cool, man.
All you guys, man, you're adding a big piece to the pie, and I think, I mean, if we all work together, it's going to be.
Super
it's the
cool,
beginning
man.
of a big movement. You know?
Hell yeah, it's exciting to be right there at the beginning. So
awesome, man.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Thanks again. All right, guys. See you on the next podcast, and have a good, thriving life.
Peace out.
Peace out.